officers not identifying themselves and pulling the people they were detaining into unmarked vehicles. Trump says Philadelphia is one of the cities where he would like to deploy federal agents in defiance of the wishes of Mayor Jim Kenney and District Attorney Larry Krasner. Krasner told WHYY's Radio Times this morning that he will prosecute any federal officers caught breaking the law here.
If they come and they follow the law, I don't know why that would be an issue. We work with federal law enforcement all the time in this office right now. It's an ongoing thing. So we have no problem with lawful behavior, but you're not going to come in here like stormtroopers and have no consequence.
Krasner says there hasn't been any unrest in Philadelphia for weeks, and that sending in federal officers could reignite tensions in the city. Also in the city, officials are asking people to delay putting out their trash by one day. Mayor Jim Kenney says crews are attempting to catch up on collections, so trash pickup won't be on schedule.
They're out working in this heat. It's not an easy job. If you see your trash collectors, please thank them and give them a bottle of water if you can. They have been working during an extremely difficult time. You can also help them tying up your trash neatly, making sure your container has a lid, and by clearly marking your
Other contributors include Capital One. Capital One's banking app lets people manage their money anytime, anywhere. Capital One. This is banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Capital One NA.
From NPR and WBUR, I'm Robin Young.
I'm Tanya Mosley. It's here and now. After months of denying the importance of wearing masks, at times calling them a double-edged sword, the president pivoted last night.
If you can, use the mask. When you can, use the mask. If you're close to each other, if you're in a group, I would put it on when I'm in a group.
Well, a recent study named Arizona the most mask-resistant state in the country. No state mandate there, though mayors are allowed to require them. And Arizona is now a state struggling on every coronavirus metric, though 1 week stats show a 25% rise in deaths, 952 hospitalizations, and while the CDC's goal for positive tests is under 5%, Arizona's is 23.8. In Tucson, in Pima County, the city council approved the use of the downtown convention center as a field hospital for COVID-19 patients, and a free testing center recently opened at the Keno Event Center. Dr. Teresa Cullen is director of public health for Pima County. She joined us today. Dr. Cullen, give us a snapshot of the situation. During that time period. Positivity rate about 12 to
higher, some days it's lower. What's most striking is our test results in our asymptomatic people. We separate them out when they come in.
So people who are asymptomatic and positive, you know, with a high rate of those. And what's your rate of people who have symptoms like that? 35%. Are people I want to ask you about this notion that people are resistant to masks in the state of Arizona. Are they resistant to tests?
It doesn't appear that way. However, our population is over 1 million people, right? And our testing center is in Tucson. So there's many rural areas that right now are struggling to get testing availability.
By the way, can you explain again the importance of testing? The president has expressed frustration. His feeling had been, if you test, then your number of cases increases. You find out about cases, and that looks bad. But why is it a good thing to test?
Testing your population enables you to identify people that have the disease, whether they are symptomatic or not. That is the only way we're going to be able to stop transmission, because if you have COVID-19 and you are asymptomatic, we need to know about that so we can work with you to try to isolate you for that disease transmission period. The reason why our numbers have gone up is because our community transmission rate, the number of people that have the disease, has increased.
We know that 87 Arizona doctors just wrote to your governor, Doug Ducey, urging him to keep the schools closed until at least October. Do you agree? Can schools open while you still have this huge transmission rate?
What we share with our community is a dashboard that we developed of 9 items that allow us to look at the disease itself, the ability for the clinical system to respond, and the response of the public health system. At this point today, 6 of those 9 indicators are red. They have been red for the last month. We are trying to base our recommendations to the schools on science, and right now, based on the science that we see in these 3 areas that most people agree are the critical domains to pay attention to, it would be difficult to recommend opening schools.
And one last question, Dr. Cullen. You mentioned that the state has been ranked one of the worst when it comes to wanting to wear masks. Last night, President Trump did a pivot on masks, said they're good, said that, you know, I have one, here it is in my pocket. You live there in Arizona. Do you think that will have an impact on people there?
I do. I think that our leaders, by embracing masks and helping educate the public about how important they are, that they will have an impact on people's individual decisions.
Dr. Tracy Cullen, the Public Health Director for Pinewa County, Tucson, where a free testing center was unveiled a week ago. Dr. Cullen, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Let's get the latest now on the Trump administration's call for unauthorized immigrants to be excluded from the census numbers used to allocate seats in Congress. Under the Constitution, the government is required to conduct a census every 2 years to figure out which states are growing in population and which states are declining. So their political power is proportional to how many people live there. But the Constitution says that count shall be determined by adding up the whole number of free persons in each state, not citizens like the Trump administration is trying to claim, which means this move is likely to spark legal challenges. For more, let's bring in Thomas Saenz. He's president of the Mexican-American Legal Defense and Educational Fund. Thomas, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Happy to join me.
Before we get into this issue, I want to ask you, some people might wonder, why do undocumented immigrants get counted towards a state's population when it comes to determining things like seats in Congress? Why has this always been the tradition until now?
Because the wording of the Constitution is quite clear on this issue. It requires an actual enumeration of all persons residing in the United States. So certainly when the Constitution was framed, residing meant what it sounds like. Everyone who's living in the United States should count. Now that makes sense at the time the Constitution was framed because there were many people living in the states who didn't have the ability under the law to vote or have any of the other rights associated with citizenship. So from the very beginning, we've included in the count every person living in each state.
Why do you think the Trump administration is trying to change this norm so that undocumented immigrants are excluded from the count?
Well, it's hard to discern the real motivation, except that it is one more instance in which Donald Trump has targeted the Latino community and the growing political power of the Latino community. But it seems like a gesture that will have no impact, given how clear the Constitution is. As you suggested, there will be legal challenges. Indeed, there already are legal challenges. He will lose those legal challenges. So it is unlikely to have any practical effect. So you look at what its rhetorical effect is, and it seems as though it's one more attempt to divert attention from the administration's failed leadership under the pandemic. And in addition, it is a dog whistle, if you will, to the far right that seems to appreciate every time Donald Trump targets those who are not citizens of the country.
What states would be most impacted by this decision to exclude immigrants?
The states that would lose if his request were to become the law are states like California, like Texas, like Florida, like New York. And these are states with large populations that traditionally have attracted immigrants of all statuses. The irony here is that one of the states that probably will take the biggest hit is a state that has, in recent years, supported Donald Trump and his political party, and that's the state of Texas.
I have one last question for you. Some polls are showing attitudes towards immigrants changing favorably since the pandemic began. Possibly more Americans are seeing immigrants serving on the front lines. But also DACA has been upheld. The citizenship question on the census was struck down. Based on your work, do you see a consensus forming?
I think there's been, for a long time, a consensus about certain of these issues. It's just that we have leadership in the U.S. Senate and in the White House that acts directly contrary to that consensus. There's overwhelming support for the DACA initiative, but more broadly, I think there is genuinely a view that when you face challenges with the pandemic, the best response is to unite as a national community, which is also why Donald Trump's continued efforts to divide are so directly contrary to what you would expect to occur in the most successful countries where they face a serious challenge like the COVID-19 pandemic.
That's Thomas Saenz, president of the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund. Thomas, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is Here Now.
Thank you for listening to 90.9 WHYY, Philadelphia's NPR member station. It's 1:17.
Izzy Bonasso got knee surgery after a tennis injury. Then her dad got a letter from a surgical assistant.
Very cordial, and it basically was explaining that this was not a bill for services.
But the implication was another unexpected bill for her surgery might soon be on the way. What to do if you get a letter like that? This afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Tune in today at 4 on 90.9 WHYY FM.
I'm Jack Lepiar. As congressional Democrats are criticizing what they call slow movement by Republicans on another round of coronavirus relief funding. House Democrats have already passed a $3 trillion spending measure that's not likely to pass the Senate. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is expected to release his own plan in the coming days. A federal judge is ordering Detroit to test more than 600 students in a summer school program. It's in response to a lawsuit called the Info and physical distancing orders. Newly obtained documents show a coronavirus outbreak at an Iowa meatpacking plant was more widespread than reported at the time. Iowa health officials said more than 200 employees at a Tyson Foods plant tested positive, but Tyson officials had told authorities days earlier the number was likely more than twice that. You're listening to Here and Now.
On 90.9 FM, it's 1:19. Some schools have pledged to consider an anti-racism curriculum when they reopen. Hear more in a couple of minutes. The Federal Aviation Administration says in the near future, it will issue an airworthiness directive regarding Boeing's troubled 737 MAX airplane. That's coming up at 1:33. Coming up Saturday night on TV 12, Verdi's Requiem, which has been called a conductor's dream come true. Watch the performance from the Philadelphia Orchestra this Saturday night at 9 on WHYY TV 12.
Political spending is going to be ridiculous this year. The ads are going to be inescapable, unless you're listening to WHYY. 0 political ads here. That's good for listeners and for businesses like yours who want to reach those listeners without getting drowned out by nasty attack ads.